Last month, Naxos Records released a CD that features trumpet concertos by composers Alexander Artunian, Mieczysław Weinberg, and Dmitry Shostakovich. What is so special about this CD, aside from the amazing trumpet playing, is that the soloist is the current principal trumpet with the Montreal Symphony Orchestra, Paul Merkelo. The three concertos on this CD are all masterworks for the instrument and have some connection to the great Soviet trumpet virtuoso Timofei Dokshitzer. Joining me here over Zoom to talk about his latest recording, I am joined by soloist and principal trumpet of the Montreal Symphony Orchestra, Paul Merkelo. Hey, Paul, it's nice to meet you here over Zoom.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Mhm. The CD is so great, and it's just such a nice cross section of the remarkable trumpet writing that Soviet composers were writing for the instrument. All three of the works on the CD have some connection to Timofei Dokshitzer. Can you talk about him and how you were first introduced to his playing?
Absolutely. Well, my family background is Ukrainian, first of all, and he was born in Ukraine. And so I think when I was probably 12 or 13 years old, just starting to play the trumpet, I had received a record of his because of his Ukrainian connection. And that's what drew me to wanting to get better on the instrument.
Hmm. And what did he do for a career? I know he played with the ballet theater orchestra for many, many years. Can you talk a little bit about his career?
Yeah, he was the principal trumpet of the Bolshoi Theater Orchestra. That's where that was his main occupation. He was also teaching at the Nessens Pedagogical Institute. But he became this, very famous soloist pretty early on in his career. And he had a number of pieces, I would say probably ranking in about the 20 or 30 mark, people writing specifically for him.
Hmm. The first CD on the recording is the Artunian Trumpet Concerto, and it has a cadenza written by Doc Schitzer. Can you talk about the concerto and some of the demands it asks of the trumpet player, and how difficult is a Doc Schitzer cadenza?
It's pretty difficult. Yeah, he wrote that cadenza because he was the first person to record the concerto. I believe that was Artunian. Artunian is Armenian, but studied in Moscow, and that was his, I believe, his sixth composition, written in 1950. And it's a real virtuoso showpiece for the instrument. So the cadenza that Dokshitzer wrote is very much in the style. I would say what's amazing about it is this virtuosic contrast between ultra high speed, flashy, sort of scalic and arpeggiated passages, mirrored with these very, very soulful lyrical passages that Aratunian wrote in the concerto.
Mhm. Uh, the next concerto on the CD is the Weinberg Concerto, and it is really something. It was written for Doc Schitzer, and the three movements are called etudes, episodes, and fanfares. Can you talk about the three movements and why Weinberg gave them these specific titles?
Yeah, well, I mean, in French, etude means study. And usually when we have etude books, we're studying one kind of technique. But in the first movement entitled Etudes, he's really exposing a side of the trumpet that's probably more known in the orchestra, a little bit more driving, energetic, a little bit more, aggressive, and very much like Shostakovich wrote in many of his symphonies in sort of the battle scene sections, if you will. It's
Mm,
more angular. It's more articulate, not so lyrical, except in the middle section. It has this very sort of ethereal, almost bluesy chromaticism to it. So that's the first movement. The second movement, I actually met Mrs. Weinberg in when I recorded this in Moscow. She showed up to all the sessions, and we had a chance to chat afterwards for quite some time. And I didn't know his family story, but he's a Polish composer. And during World War II, Poland was being invaded by the Nazis, and but he was becoming famous as a composer. And Shostakovich actually met him and said, you should leave now, and you
mm,
should get your family out, and you should come to Moscow. It's going to be safe for you there, and I can find you an apartment, and I can help you. So he took him up on that. And he tried to convince his family to go, but his family didn't want to go,
mm.
and he left. And shortly thereafter, his family was sent to concentration camps and perished there. And the second movement of this particular concerto, when you hear it, if you know that backstory, in many ways, it's a tribute to his family that lost their lives. There's a very poignant beginning and ending section that's just one of the most beautiful lyrical passages ever in any trumpet concerto, in my opinion. And then there's this very driving, sort of angry lyricism that's also happening in the middle section, where the orchestra is playing full volume and the trumpet solo is just riding over that sound. Third movement, entitled Fanfares, is, I would say, very much of a parody. It's got quotes from Mendelssohn Midsummer Night's Dream, the Wedding March, Mahler's Fifth Symphony, Petrushka, Bizet's Carmen. And it's these little fanfares just, juxtaposed one on top of the other in a very parody style, but with all seriousness and technical demands.
Yeah, when I first heard the second movement of the concerto, I thought actually he was going to full on quote the opening to Mahler 5 in the strings, but no, he did move somewhere else. It's also a long concerto. You must have to have chops of steel to perform it, right? It comes in a little under 25 minutes, which is long for a brass concerto, right?
It's heavy. It's heavy. The Aratunian, an example, which is a very famous concerto that a lot of people play, is quite a bit shorter, but it's all in one movement, so it goes by real quick. The Weinberg is like a symphony for trumpet. In fact, he said that at one point, that this is like a symphony featuring a trumpet solo, and I love that, because, well, that's my two worlds, is playing in the orchestra, but also playing as a soloist. So in the Weinberg, I really felt like I was part of both of those worlds.
Mm-hmm. The last concerto on the CD is what is sometimes called Shostakovich's first piano concerto, but the first piano concerto has a very prominent solo trumpet part. My understanding is that Dokshitzer took that concerto, rearranged it with Shostakovich's blessing to make the piece more of a double concerto. Can you talk about what exactly Dokshitzer did to the trumpet part to sort of add on that breadth?
Well, let me clarify. He and Shostakovich were very close, and he was always asking Shostakovich for a trumpet concerto, but never getting a real confirmation on that. Sort of like, yeah, I'll get to it someday, but it never happened. So he never actually got the blessing to do that arrangement, but he justified the arrangement because of the fact that Shostakovich was saying, without actually committing, saying, yes, one day I'll write a trumpet concerto for you, but never did it. So I think, Dokshitzer, being a very celebrated arranger, he decided to take it upon himself to make it more or less of a double concerto. And so what we did was, there is a published version of this, but it's only for trumpet and piano. He didn't publish it with orchestra for whatever reason. We don't really know the story about that. But I was able to obtain, through various contacts, quite a few of the sketches, and we put together a version that honors the original score. And we created, based on his transcription, this more or less of a double concerto. And it was quite complicated, but I had to contact the lawyers of Mrs. Shostakovich in Paris, and she gave us her blessing to perform this and record it.
And so this is the first ever recording of this newly arranged version of the concerto, right?
This is the first commercial recording. Dokshitzer actually did an archival recording of it when he first tried it out, and the International Trumpet Guild, within their CD label, released an archival recording of it. But this is the first commercial recording of the work. Yes.
Mm-hmm. The CD was recorded with the Russian National Orchestra under the direction of Hans Graf, with Jae Hyuk Cho playing the piano part in Shostakovich. What were the recording sessions like? And I have to wonder, did you have an opportunity to talk shop with any of the trumpet players in the Russian National?
Yes, I did. We didn't have much time because we had to record 3 concertos in 3 days. And we only had basically 2 days of rehearsals prior to that. So it was quite an intense time. And I also had to we filmed a concert documentary that same week, which you can see on YouTube right now. We've got snippets of it, and on my social media too, you could see small sections of this documentary. But yes, I did get to talk shop. Many of them know Dokshitzer, personally studied with him or studied with one of his students. There's such a big connection there. It's very similar to Maurice André's influence in Europe. That, hey, he's his legend. continues way beyond the years that he was actually alive. So when I went there, I really felt the power and the presence of Mr. Dokshitzer, and that was for me humbling and very inspiring to be around those guys and hear their stories about him and the effect that he had on them.
Mm-hmm. I was looking at the back of the CD, and one of the things I found really interesting is the recording was made pre-pandemic and pre-invasion. And is it right that your proceeds for this CD are going to go towards supporting the people of Ukraine? Is that correct?
That's correct. That was my idea. It was my condition with Naxos that in order to release this, I wanted to donate all of the proceeds that I make from either physical copy sales, which, as we know, doesn't, physical copies are not as popular, although they are selling when I do a lot of solo concerts. And if people are interested in a physical copy and they go to my website, paulmerkelotrumpet.com, I will personally sign it, send it to them, and I get more royalty on those, which can go directly to UNICEF. So what happened was in my family background being Ukrainian, I did a fundraising concert here in Montreal last fall where I raised $160,000 in one night for UNICEF for the children of Ukraine. So
Wow.
when we have that still, that link is still available to make donations. So what I thought I would do is just every proceed that I make on streaming or physical copies, I'm going to give it back to UNICEF for the children of Ukraine until this conflict is over.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Are you going to be performing any of the concertos on the CD in the near future, or are you just full on Montreal Symphony right now? What's next for you?
Well, I'm leaving actually Monday. I'm going to Mexico to premiere a different concerto, but then I'll play the Aratunian in recital when I go to, I'm going to do a recital in Boulder, Colorado. And then in January 19th, I'm doing the Aratunian with Montreal Symphony here in our Maison Symphonique. And we have, right now, my manager is working on a number of other performances in next season and in the 24-25 season of not only the Russian repertoire that's on this album, all three of those concertos we're trying to book around the world. But
Right.
I have some news to announce, and I'm very excited to say that I'll be premiering the Wynton Marsalis
Oh,
trumpet
wow.
concerto. He's never written a concerto before, so I'm going to premiere that in August with our new music director, Rafael Payade, here with the Montreal Symphony. And so we're also concurrently booking the Marsalis and the Russian repertoire. So for me, it's a very exciting time to be able to have the opportunity, especially with COVID. We had such a denial of performance opportunities. Now it's so exciting for me to look forward and look for the future to playing these wonderful concertos.
Fantastic. Paul, this has just been great. The CD is absolutely phenomenal. And I have to say, I am a particular fan of the Artunian Concerto, so it's nice to have a new favorite recording. Thanks for taking the
Thank
time
you.
to chat with me today.
Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.